Welcome to Hot Takes, brought to you by 50cupstea.com, where united we sip, discuss, and learn. Join us as we dive into the hottest takes on culture, business trends, and the threads that bind us. Get ready for inspiring stories, candid conversations, and a fresh perspective on living a healthy, fulfilled life. Grab your cup and tune in. Let's get started.
Hello, everybody. I'm Bill Ame, and it's time for another wonderful program. It's called 50 Cups Hot Take with Jim Bakker, who is an extraordinary entrepreneur and successful businessman. Jim, it's good to see you.
Yeah, you as well. How was your trip this morning?
Oh, it was fast. It was fast. We got here as quickly as we can because I love your hot takes. I really do. And I'm kind of excited about it. Do you mind? Can you just give us a hint? What are we going to be talking about today?
Four things. A couple of them are timely, obviously. We're going to start off just simply talking about microplastics and what they're doing to our bodies. We're going to move on to this plant-based versus beef type of diet. And then I thought we'd save the fun stuff for last, which is the vote counting, since we're in the election season at this point in time. Mm-hmm. And some of those celebrities that are threatening to lead the country, Bruce Springsteen, Bryan Cranston, Miley Cyrus, etc. So, just want to kind of talk about that towards the end of the podcast as well.
I can't wait. And of course, each and every time we get together, you bring us some delicious tea. Yeah,
so today I have, since it's phenomenally warm out there, not in a bad way, I just love the warmth, and it's beautiful. I mean, the leaves are falling, got this fall, but it's 70 some odd degrees, and it's spectacular out there. So I thought we'd go with a little iced tea today.
Beautiful.
So today I have English breakfast tea, and I did add a little lemon to it today, freshly brewed this morning. Again,
a little
I got some ice.
Wow.
Kind of on fire with the ice lately. My previous podcast, when I had the benefit of podcasting my mom, which I had a great time with, I actually brought ice this time. So
very good.
It's going to be a little bit more chilled, but I did not sweeten this like I sweetened the tea for my mom, since she loves sugar, but it seems to work for her since she's 86 years old and still doing great. So,
well, I feel privileged and honored to be getting ice, just like your mom.
Yeah, and the beauty about English breakfast is it not only gives you energy, but it provides some clarity of thought, and I think it helps you become more organized and looking at your calendars and following your schedules and things like that. So it is a phenomenally refreshing tea, but also has some spectacular benefits as well.
Wow, it does taste delicious. Should have been given out during the election.
Should have been.
For folks to get clarity of mind. But in any case, it is delicious. And as always, if folks would like to partake in the wonderful teas that you offer, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, 50cupstea.com. And we do have all of our special flavors that are available. Again, organic. Even our bag tea is, it's an organic bag. It doesn't have any microplastics in it, dyes, etc., which kind of leads us to our first topic today.
Yeah, absolutely. What's going on with can't be good? The plastics that it's plastics everywhere.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming you've done a little research on that. What's the real story on the plastics, Jim?
So, I will say that prior to the 1950s, there was very little of any plastic in our society. So if you went to the butcher, for example, they'd wrap everything in paper. You bring it home, you cook it. Everything was basically locally grown, and you shopped locally. So there wasn't, any significant need for additional packaging to preserve food, for longer periods of time. But obviously, as the country grew and as technology innovated, plastics really, took off in our society, probably in the 60s and in the 70s. Byproduct of that are these microplastics that are around here now. And basically a microplastic is a 1 microgram per 1,000. And a nanoplastic is a less than 1 gram per 1,000.
Well, where do these come from?
Yeah.
Just off the plastic?
Right. So I think it comes from a lot of different stuff, but for the most part, the tires that you are using on your car today, whether you have an electric vehicle or you have a gas vehicle, there's microplastics in them. So they put them in to preserve the tire. So in the old days, you might have gotten 20,000 miles on a tire. Today you get 50,000 miles. So they're not 100% rubber anymore. Obviously there's some metal in there and there's other products as well. But a lot of these tires that we all drive on every single day have plastic in them. And as a result, as the tire goes down the road, no matter what speed you're going, the tire is going to wear, and the byproduct of that is you have these microplastics that get into the air. So first and foremost, all of us, no matter where you are and where you're located, are breathing in these microplastics on a daily basis. The body has a phenomenal way of detoxing. However, they have found in cadavers that in organs and pretty much every part of your body, they found microplastics in the body. They've also found, I don't remember what it's called, but in the first poop, basically, after a baby is born, they have found microplastics in the baby. Wow. So obviously it's in the fetus then. And what's bad about these microplastics and nanoplastics is that they can penetrate the three barriers in your body where you don't want any penetration. So first and foremost, they can penetrate the blood-brain barrier, wow. Right? So there's microplastics in your head. They can also penetrate the testicular barrier. And why is that important? Obviously, the body's wonderfully designed to protect certain areas. Obviously, the brain, that's pretty self-explanatory. And then you have your reproductive organs within your male and female. Vitally important that you protect those as well. Otherwise, at the end of the day, the human race can't reproduce.
Right.
So we're seeing a lot of, I'm sure everybody's read about this, numbers out there of decreasing fertility rates, people having more and more difficulty, conceiving and having babies. And there has to be a reason for that. Now, there's no specific study that's being done in humans right now. They have been done in animal studies, but there's no specific studies that are being done in humans where they can actually link, some of these microplastics back to fertility rates, et cetera. But it penetrates the testicular barrier within a male, and then it penetrates the follicle barrier within a female. So, no matter how hard the mom tries to eliminate plastics, there's going to be plastics in her reproductive system. And obviously, do have studies where they've shown that sperm, has plastic in it as well. And then you've also read recently that not only are sperm counts down, but also the modality of the sperm, where basically in the old days, for lack of a better term, it rocked right through and, only one sperm needs to penetrate that egg to, right. Fertilize that egg. And so the modality, if they're, not exactly swimming straight, so to speak, if they're,
I did not know that.
They're poor, it's like a drunk driver almost, then it's going to be more difficult, for, conception to occur. So that's the problem with the microplastics.
Okay.
So you have them in your air. They're obviously in the sea. So, and then the most important place that they're in is in bottled water.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that, of course.
So when they started testing bottled water years ago, basically they found that there were 30,000 microplastic per liter in your bottle of water. And now with better technology, they have this infrared technology where they can see that they're not only micro particles, but there's also nanoparticles. And the average bottled water now has up to 200,000 microparticles in the water bottle. So
that's crazy. I mean, and people drink bottled water thinking that it's a healthier way to go.
Sure, it's a phenomenal market. I mean, it's amazing to me that people still get dehydrated in this country. I mean, there's water everywhere. And, but the problem is we don't actually know how that water is processed. So you have this bottle that's obviously built for flexibility so it doesn't crack and break and leak. It's built to hold the water. It's built to handle extreme temperatures. Well, all that comes with a price. Sure. And in this case, we are ingesting, these microparticles every single day. So one of the solutions, obviously, is to drink out of a metal cup and potentially, obviously, get a filter for your house and drink tap water that's filtered that can remove these particles. And there are a bunch of different products out there that can do that. Some of them, though, do pull the minerals out of the water. So you probably want to, unfortunately, it's probably going to cost a little bit more. You want to find one that actually pulls the plastic, but also keeps the minerals.
Okay.
But if not, then you could just go eat more minerals with your better diet and supplements, and you'll be fine.
Is that enough, though? I mean, if it's already in your body and it seems like an extraordinary amount of it, does your body pass it at some point? I mean, can you eventually become free of this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, other than those three areas, as I said, the brain, the testicles, and the follic.
Well, those are important areas.
Yes, you can't pass from there.
You can't get rid of it.
I mean, once they're in, and once they get in, obviously, because they're so microscopic. And obviously, that's an issue, I think, with some of the medications that are out there, and statins in particular, because they also, most of them pass the blood-brain barrier as well. So it's one thing to have your cholesterol lowered, but is it also going to affect your head at some point in time as well? And
that's a great question.
We don't know, right? So I'm sure there's studies being done in that area, because that's a wildly popular drug at this point in time. There's billions of dollars that are exchanged every single year on that. But not to get into the heart world today. Your body does excrete plastics. So they found that in general that they did a study, I think, a few years ago where they had X amount of people drinking bottled water for 5 straight days, and they had X amount of people that didn't drink bottled water for 5 straight days. They analyzed the urine, and the people that drank the bottled water had, let's just say, I can't remember the exact measurement, but 200,000 to 300,000 more plastic particles in their water, in their urine than those that didn't. And then they reversed it. So they took the people that didn't drink the bottled water, then they did the bottled water, and vice versa. And the good news they found is the people that drank the water, after a few days of not drinking the water, their particle waste was reduced, meaning that they weren't having to excrete as much plastic as they were doing before.
But it sounds like, if I'm wrong, you'll correct me, that we still don't have a real study or research on how much is in the body, how much is too much, and the long-term effects of it. I mean, if it's going into the brain, if it's having an impact on your testicles, I got to believe it also has some kind of impact on your brain, but they don't know, do they?
They don't.
Not yet, anyway.
Yeah, it's, obviously a lot of this stuff is pretty tough to figure out because, let's say the bottled water industry exploded in the 80s, 90s. Mm-hmm. Well, that's 40, 50 years ago, 30 years ago. Sometimes the body takes a long time, to present, with symptoms going forward. Now, there are arguments out there that, autism, ADHD, et cetera, especially in kids, there's no direct link. But, again, we talked about this earlier in other podcasts. Why are people becoming more unhealthy? And, hopefully, they will take that seriously and look into that a little bit further going forward. Because, as a kid especially, you go to soccer practice, mom's probably putting a Gatorade in your pouch or a bottle of water. Very few people are at home, mixing their own concoction and putting it in a metal container. So it's wildly convenient. It's easy. And in most cases, it's sold as, hey, drink this healthy drink. That's great. It might be super healthy, but if it's bottled in plastic, then you're also it's not exactly pure, right?
Right.
I think the other thing too is, and I've seen it, being in the retail world, you order all of your product off of a truck, and that truck, unless you're buying refrigerated food, not water, that truck is not refrigerated when you get your water and your dry goods, so to speak. So you have no idea where that water has been once it left the manufacturer. Did it sit on a pallet in 90-degree heat before it got shipped? Because the goal is if you don't heat the plastic as much, then less opportunity for the plastics to, basically absorb into the water that's in the bottle. But you just don't know where that plastic bottle has been before it hits your mouth.
Well, and the thing that you pointed out, and I think it's really important, is that we are less healthy than we were in the past. and especially the kids. You brought up autism and a lot of other issues that they're facing. And each time we do a podcast, Jim, we're talking about something that potentially harms you in everyday products that people aren't aware of. And yet we're dependent on I guess, a bureaucracy to protect us, and it doesn't. So from your perspective, you're doing a lot of research, and I know you're really health conscious. What does the average guy and gal do? I mean, now we're talking about microplastics in water bottles or in tires. I mean, how do you avoid it?
Well, I mean, some of them
you can't,
right? So, but I will say, in addition to water bottles, the other killer, I shouldn't say killer, the other prevalent leakage within a drink comes from coffee cups that are paper-based. So when you go to your favorite coffee shop to get your hot coffee or your hot tea, hopefully it's tea and not coffee, that product, you got plastics that are leaking into that product because, again, all for profit in a good way and all for flexibility, et cetera, is that, if you had a pure paper cup, you're probably going to burn your hand and the cup is going to dissolve after a while. It's paper.
Sure.
So it has to be coated in plastic in order for that cup to maintain its strength, its flexibility, et cetera. And then on top of that, you throw that little plastic lid on top and then you sip through that lid. That adds a couple extra micro or nanoparticles, into your bloodstream every single day. Now, the good news about some of that is that you're going to excrete it. But the bad news, it's going to get in your bloodstream because everything that goes in your stomach eventually gets in your bloodstream. And some of it's going to probably hang out in your head or your testicles or your
Well, this is all, your body's being exposed to things that has never been exposed to in history, really.
Right. So then what can you do? I will say one more thing. They did find that some people that suffer from irritable bowel syndrome, they found more plastic going through their system than others. So that may contribute to some of the IB issues that are out there right now. What can you do? Pretty much try to avoid bottled water as much as you possibly can. And I would also recommend that you avoid the sneaky bottled water. So let's say you work in a company and let's say they have, the free water fountain. But if you look at the water fountain, there's usually a 5 or 10 gallon jug of water in plastic that's sitting on top of the water fountain. So then you're pouring into your steel cup, you're still getting the particles, right? But there's only so much you can do. So if you are in a workplace environment where you got to drink out of the tap, for example, and or something like that, that's not filtered. Now, my company, when I had it, we had a filtered system, which removed the particles back then. But maybe you can lobby your company, hey, get me something that's filtered. It doesn't cost that much money for a company, and I'm sure they would be happy to do it since it's a win for them with their employees. And on top of that, it's all about employment engagement, right? So. And lastly, of course, you want to have healthy employees because if you don't, then it's hard to get work done. But as an individual, just cut back on the water bottles. Get your own metal container, fill it up, from your house in the morning, and just look at other opportunities to fill it up during the day where you're not, just consuming bottled water. If you love going to the Starbucks or some other coffee shop like 50 Cups in the old days before I got out of retail, buy the drink. And then just pour it into your metal container. If they won't, we would have, of course, served you at 50 Cups if you brought your own metal container in. But if they don't do that, don't let it sit there forever. Just dump it into, a metal, cup for yourself. So you're, again, not, sipping a drink for 5 minutes where those particles can get into you. So, I mean, there are some things you can do. You're not going to eliminate, the particles from your body.
Well, I think you're making people aware that these are out there and causing an issue, even though we don't know what the end result will be. I think it's incredibly helpful. And I know I've changed toothpaste. I don't drink Gatorade. And so you've changed my life. And I'm sure a lot of people who have listened to this, their eyes are opened. I hope that at some point we get a system in place that can kind of take over. So it's not always on the individual, right, Jim? That there's something that is out there.
Yeah. And, and I'm talking a lot about micro particles and nano. And I kind of mean at the end of the day that they're there, but also, what comes with that are the PBAs, right? I always mispronounce this word, so I want to make sure I read it. bisphenol A and bisphenol S, and they're endocrine disruptors.
Yeah.
So when you mess with your endocrine system, which is your hormones, then obviously that, like I said earlier, leads to fertility issues, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, it affects your overall being, really.
Yeah, and there's another famous podcaster out there right now who's a doctor, and she was saying that babies, males, there's some kind of measurement between, I guess, the scrotum to the anus where, there has to be, let's say 2 inches. And if it's less than that, then they're saying now that that's a precursor to potential fertility issues down the road. So again, look her up. I don't remember her name, but if you went on podcast and punch in that search criteria, you could probably find it, or went on YouTube or whatever. But a lot, it's, so you got your bottled water, you got your hot drink paper cups, you got your tires, and if you're a soup lover.
Yeah. Oh, no, not soup, Jim.
You got your soup cans.
Oh, not the soup cans.
Yes. And again, the soup cans are lined with plastic to prevent, to preserve the flavor, of the soup. Soup has acid in it. It's got fat in it. All that stuff would eat away at a metal container. So I would probably either eliminate soup if you're, like to have soup at home, or make your own. And or you got to be careful with these restaurants you go to, because I don't think a lot of them, make the homemade soup out of leftovers from the day before. I think they just buy a giant metal can that's lined with plastic, and then they pour it out, heat it, and then they serve it to you during the day. So even if you go into a restaurant to get soup, my recommendation would be to go soupless going forward. And those are really the 4 primary things, other than, you buying plastic containers to preserve your food, leftovers. When you see microwave safe, all that means is the plastic's not going to melt. It doesn't mean that those plastics aren't going to get into your food supply. So at home, we've gone to all glass. Just try to eliminate any type of thing you possibly are doing on a daily basis that might have anything to do with plastic. But again, there's not a heck of a lot you can do in some other areas. I mean, you're not going to stop driving your car. You're not going to stop breathing. When you go to the grocery store, you're still going to buy your meat that's wrapped in plastic. But if you can get it out, and get it into something else real quick, those types of minor things might be able to help you reduce some of the plastics in your body.
It's fascinating. It would be interesting to see that someone who could actually do that, eliminate as much of the things that we've talked about on this program, how much healthier they ultimately would be. But it's crazy what we accept. And I know the reason behind all of this is a good one, I guess. When they are lining the cans with plastic, you've explained why they do it, and we accept it. But I never knew that it presented a danger.
Yeah. So, beauty of our country is you can get food anywhere at any time, right?
Right.
The old days, there were little mini gardens throughout major cities, and they supplied the food, or somebody would drive in the food from a farm. Now it comes in trucks, and these 10, 15 million populated metro areas, get their food, very easily. It's obviously in grocery stores,
right?
But so there's a lot of good that came from it, but at the flip side, there's always a price.
Just anecdotally, I was watching a concert on TV, and the concert was a big name star, and he was in, Europe somewhere. And I was watching the crowd. They were showing a lot of the crowd effect, and there wasn't a fat person in there. And this was a crowd of all ages. And then I look at us, not you. You're not obese, but you look at Americans in general,
right,
and we're kind of the laughing stock when you go over to Europe. They have a much different system. Be nice to maybe adopt some of that.
Here's a hot take on some 50 Cups tea.
The Immune Booster Tea helps your body to fight off disease due to its carefully crafted ingredients. It contains peppermint and spearmint, which strengthen the immune system and fight bacteria. Ginger, which fights disease through its antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties. Echinacea, which modifies the immune system. Elderberry, which contains vitamin C, phenolic acids, flavonols, and anthocyanins, which modulates the body's immune response. And it also contains oregano, which has powerful antibacterial properties.
Visit 50cupstea.com to find out more.
Some people say, Jim, that stop eating meat, man. Get away from meat. And I'm a big beef guy. Go to the plants, eat plants, and you'll be a lot healthier. Although they seem pale and thin when I see people who are vegetarians, I guess. What do you think about, let's say, plant versus animal?
Yes, I'm not going to cover the whole vegan thing because that's almost like a religion.
It is.
In this case, it's just a simple plant-based diet versus a beef diet or a meat diet in this kind of situation. And I'll include fish and chicken, pork, and beef as I describe a meat-based diet compared to a plant-based diet. Mm-hmm. So I just go back in time. So when we were hunters and gatherers, thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, before I think we learned how to farm, we would roam, the countryside, and we would, most likely kill an animal.
Yeah, we would hunt and gather.
Probably through trial and error, and the error being a bad thing, we probably didn't live. We would go and pull, berries or leaves off of plants and eat them. So the body basically was designed to have this equilibrium, of, high protein, in this case, meat, and also plant. And it seems like there's been this assault over the last 20 years or so on beef, in our country, and mostly centered around the environment and the fact that, cows in general, they, produce methane.
Yeah.
And methane is not good for the environment.
Right.
Even though methane's been around forever, in the environment. So I started thinking about this more, and I'm like, man, we're going to go down this rat hole in this country where eventually we have no choices as humans. And we either have to go all on the plant-based, diet with this fake meat that's out there right now. And I remember a few years ago when it came out, the stock took off like a rocket. It tasted just like beef, but if you actually looked at the ingredients, there wasn't anything in there, that was healthy. It was loaded with a lot of seed oils. It was loaded with salt. It was loaded with fake fat. They had a couple sprinkles of probably some plant, that's supposed to be good for you in there. But at the end of the day, you're basically eating chemicals. Yeah. And as we know, we've covered that before, that's just simply not good. No. But then going a step further with the environment, industrial farming is actually the worst possible thing you could do for our environment. What does that mean? Well, if I have to feed 330 million people and they're not allowed to eat any type of meat anymore, then I got to have these, giant farms everywhere. And what are they going to do? They're going to strip trees and other plant life out of there, and they're just going to grow and grow and grow. And then they're going to pull the topsoil every year and have to bring in new topsoil. They're going to fertilize. They're going to throw pesticides in it because if they get a blight, then they won't be able to feed the population. So we're going to have runoff in our rivers, et cetera, et cetera. And, these beef farms that are out there are regenerative farms, for the most part. I'm not talking about the ones where they herd up, 1 trillion cattle a day and give them the electric prod and slaughter them and send them to the butcher eventually. I'm talking about these other, farms that are highly, I shouldn't say they're regulated. They are regulated, but it seems like there's a war going on with, eliminating or preventing, some of this regenerative farming. And that's what we had been doing for, hundreds of years. Mm-hmm. And what do I mean by that? Well, cow, is in a grass pasture. Cow eats the grass, right? Right. He also excretes, right? And then that's fertilizer for the ground.
Grows the grass.
Also feeds, other wildlife like birds, et cetera, et cetera. They drop seedlings everywhere, and then we have more grass, we have more trees, we have this whole environmental ecosystem that goes on, right? And with industrial farming, you're never going to get that. So not only do I think that from a nutritional standpoint, eating full plant-based diets I don't think they're good for you, because I don't think there's no natural source of protein in most cases, enough protein, I should say. I also think that if you actually look at your digestive tract and figure it out, my guess is in most people, not everybody, because every human's different, your stomach's going to feel a little bit better eating meat than it will be, trying to knock out a broccoli, a cabbage, a pea, a bean. I mean, it's highly fibrous. It's difficult sometimes for the body to break that down. So you may end up, in situations that aren't comfortable for you from a digestive situation.
Well, I was going to ask because our bodies were designed to eat meat.
Yeah, they
Right?
were.
I
Yeah.
mean,
That's why you have strong jaws, way of teeth, the whole works. Right.
everything was kind of designed to do that, in addition to plant as well. So to choose one over another seems kind of silly. And also maybe very harmful to not only the environment, to all of us.
Right.
So there is this battle going on, though, Jim. I don't know who's winning the battle. I kind of think the meat industry is. Because a lot of people don't want to just eat plants, right?
Yeah, it's pretty big. And like, I'm not predicting doom and gloom tomorrow, but I just, you know, as I look into this, you know, there's the health portion of it. And I just, for me personally, based on the research I've done, well, there's no benefit, you know, to going full plant-based. I think there's a better benefit to have a combination of both.
Right.
And then you throw the environmental piece on top of it, and to me, that's a no-brainer at that point. But it's sold as, you know, let's get rid of the cows because they're crushing the environment. Well, that's actually helping. They're actually helping the environment. You know, and then going back to what I said earlier, you know, a lot of people are like, well, forget the beef. You know, let's just focus on the chicken and the fish. You know, well, you know, if there's 1 billion particles of plastic in the ocean, because those plastics that I talked about before, they're not biodegradable. So they just sit there in the ocean, and then the salt and the water. The beauty about the ocean is probably, I think they said it takes like 200 years to get rid of a water bottle. Yeah. I mean, in thousands of years they'll be gone. But you know,
we keep adding to it.
Right, exactly. So now the fish have the nice plastic inside them as well, and you're going to go ahead and ingest that on a regular basis also. So, you know, I think with anything, it's all about balance, but it's a hot take of mine that we're being sold a bill of goods. And I think a lot of people just simply, whatever source they're getting their material from, they buy that. And I would just encourage you all to actually do a deep dive on this thing and really figure out what's actually good for the environment and what's not, and what's actually good for your body and what isn't.
Yeah, and for your kids. And, you know, we just got to get in the game, I guess, Jim. That's my hot take on listening to your hot takes is we have to get involved in what we eat and our lifestyle. Do you want to talk about the counting on election yet? Or I'm so anxious to get to it because I don't know about you. It's been a pretty big deal as far as people questioning how it's done. If it's legit, if it's not legit, can you cheat? And I don't even know how they count it on election night. That just seems almost an impossibility sometimes because I voted and it goes into a machine. And once it's in the machine, Jim, I don't know what happens. I assume everything works well.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to go into that.
I'm sure it does.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to go into that assumption. So it's 2 days after the election. Yeah. Like probably a lot of you know, you're in a habitual situation where every 4 years, from a presidential standpoint, but maybe you love watching TV every 2 years when they have the House and Senate. Some of those, or all of them, are up for re-election during that time. But for me, I'm more of a 4-year person. And in the old days, you know, you sat around from 8 o'clock on at night, and usually by 10, maybe 11 o'clock at night.
It was over.
It was over.
Yeah,
right. And then in 2000, when you had the whole Bush-Gore thing, which took almost till mid-December, I guess, before the Supreme Court finally had to make a decision. You know, that seemed like after Bush-Gore, suddenly you weren't getting the finality done until either much later in the evening or the next morning or 2020, the weekend after the election. So I started thinking to myself, what is going on? Like, we have all this technology. Elon Musk can land a rocket back on its pad, but we can't figure out how to count votes fast. Now, part of it is if I'm a network and I have 330 million people in this country and I want to start at 7 p.m. and I want to sell a bunch of advertising on commercials, do I really want to shut this thing down and have everybody go to sleep at 10 o'clock at night?
No, probably not. Probably not.
And then since we have a lot of people that live on the West Coast, I really want to bleed this thing into East Coast time, like 2 or 3 a.m., because now I got the West Coasters that are home doing what the East Coasters did, you know, at 7 or 8 o'clock at night. So I have all these eyeballs, you know, all night long. And in fairness, you know, some of the the earlier elections that were called maybe discouraged, people on the West Coast to vote because they're like, well, it's already over. There's no point in me voting.
Right.
And obviously you want everybody to vote.
Yes.
So that's my first take, on why this is now, it's becoming more of a sport where it's prolonged and they want people to, to stay tuned, so to speak.
Yes.
Second thing is that, and I agree with this, it's up to the states to make their own election laws and to, follow the procedures and protocol to validate the votes and count the votes and make sure they're secure and it's safe, et cetera, et cetera. And so I decided to sample, a couple different states. In Florida, which went from probably the worst state in the country in 2000, where you had the hanging chads, you had
I remember
some
that.
digital ballots, you had paper ballots, every county was different. And then we all sat glued to our TVs through Thanksgiving, watching some
I hold up
some
the
clerk,
card.
with glasses on,
Yes.
holding up whether,
Yes.
and the vote count would change like every day, right?
Mhm.
And since then, Florida said, you know what, we got to do a better job. So I'm going to summarize, but their intent is to make sure that every ballot is that's cast is counted, processed, and fits the guidelines. And if it's not, it gets kicked out. And so the state set, specific guidelines, and then obviously forced the counties in this case, to follow those guidelines. And their intent was, we really want to have a fair, safe election where we can count all the ballots, post close within an hour or 2 hours after the last polls have closed. Right.
Right.
And that's why you now see Florida, delivering the results, within a couple hours after the polls have shut down. You take North Carolina, for example, and we have early voting in our state, but after I think 2020, they finally said, hey, anything that's early needs to be processed, and early voting ends the weekend before the election day on that Tuesday, and they've counted all the ballots. So now all they have to do on election day is just count, who voted. I mean, how many votes are counted on election day. They can add them to the tally that's already been counted, and boom, the results come out, hopefully within a few hours post-election. Now, I will say North Carolina was the first swing state, that was decided, and I think it was around 11 o'clock at night. So the polls closed at 7:30, so it was a 3.5 hour wait. Now, what all these states don't take into account is based on the size, and it's usually these big cities within states where they got to process a lot of votes. The only question I'd have is, well, they already know this, so why don't they just bring more people and more machines, into these municipalities so they can process them as fast as some of the smaller counties.
That would make sense.
Nonetheless, their intent was, get these ballots counted within guidelines, and they have a voter ID law now in North Carolina too. And I don't want to go into that today, but there's a lot of other states that have incorporated that as well. So there's less disruption or disputes on certain ballots that might have been cast. Pennsylvania, which we waited forever in 2020, have tightened up their rules as well, but for some reason they're not allowed to count the early voting or mail-in until election day. So that just exasperates the problem, and that's why it takes a little bit longer for Pennsylvania to get their vote total out. I think they finally called the state around 3 a.m. On Wednesday morning. Way better than what it was, in 2020, but in my opinion, still a little bit slow. Now you take a state like California.
Yes.
And their intent is basically to make sure everybody possible can vote pretty much whenever they want through election day. So, but then in most states, when you do a mail-in ballot, it has to be received, on election day. And if it's not received, it doesn't count.
Right.
California says, no, it can be, as long as it's mailed by election day, we're going to give it another 7 days after that. So in case the post office screws up, in case you screwed up and you were late, whatever it is, you got up to 7 days to get that ballot counted after the election's over. So I guess ultimately my hot take is, structure always dictates behavior. And if the structure of your state is to be able to, provide a safe and effective way to vote and to count the votes, then I think the citizenry will adjust to that. And there's no fraud in that case that you hear about, at least. So Florida, nobody's crying about the votes down there. Nobody cried about North Carolina. Nobody cried about Pennsylvania. Obviously, on the flip side, nobody seems to care if you're in California that this works, because that's the structure that they set up out there. But I think at the end of the day, if your intent is to get these votes cast as and counted as quickly as possible, then obviously some of these states need to potentially change their election laws. And maybe there's some guidelines that can be put down going forward as recommendations from the federal government. But, it's probably something that, from a hot take perspective, I don't see it getting resolved, in the next election. So we'll probably be up again until, 3 or 4 in the morning. But thankfully, I did not do that. At midnight, I called it quits.
Good for you.
And went to bed.
Good for you. Well, I think, too, there was a benefit to this election, the most recent one, because there really didn't leave any question that whether or not the voting may have been, that had to go back for a recount. Nobody questioned the outcome in this case. Recently, though, they have, right? So you have to go back, and there were a lot of accusations. COVID was in there as well. But, Jim, we used to have election day. You'd go in on election day, and nobody complained about it that I'm aware of, and you cast your vote, and you're right. By 10 o'clock, everybody knew who won. That has been mucked up pretty good. You have early voting, you have mail-in, and now it's to everybody, not just the military or somebody out of. So how do you combat any of it? Or do you need to?
Well, I just think if you want to, and you brought up an excellent point, which I didn't bring up before, if you really want to maintain the integrity of an election process, then you have to figure out a way to timely process, count, and report the votes.
Right.
I think on the front end, you can easily, solve that issue of who can vote and who can't vote based on what your requirements are. But I think it gets muddled because nobody's really focusing as much on I shouldn't say nobody is, a lot of states are, but there are some states that don't really seem to care about the back end. And why that is beyond me, because to me, that is a much bigger issue from a country perspective than the front end is. And I think in this day and age, you have to have an ID to get on a plane, to go get a renewal license, to passports, to whatever. And for some reason, some states don't have voter ID. But again, I'm not going to get into that today. I just simply think that, that's a front end issue that a lot of states focus on, and they should really be focused on the back end issue, because that's where I think people, starts questioning whether or not our elections are fair. And
when that happens, that's a big problem.
Yeah, and I love what France does. They have 2 rounds. They over a weekend they vote like in June, and then they vote again in August. And now their system's a little bit different than ours because they're they vote for like the top 3 or 4, and then there's another top 2 after that, et cetera, et cetera. But there isn't any mail-in. It's done. You go, you do it. And you go back again and do it again 2 months later. I'm not advocating we go to the France model, but I am advocating that, in a way, it might be cool just to have a holiday.
Yeah, a 3-day
do
weekend.
A Veterans holiday, yes. Veterans Day on November 11th, and that is the election day also.
Beautiful.
Maybe make it on a Monday. Maybe it's not the 11th, but it's that second Monday of the month, and polls open on Saturday. You got 3 days and a holiday, to go vote. And,
I love that idea.
But again, that's a federal issue, not a state issue. So then you're getting into, areas that the feds might be overstepping their bounds. But that's my hot take.
It's a good hot take. When people begin to question the election and they mistrust the outcome, you have big problems. And then even worse is when you have a group of people, Jim, who really support a particular candidate and are so fearful of another that they have made a promise. They said, I am leaving the country. and some of these folks I like. I like to watch them or listen to their music, and it seems to come around now every election cycle. I mean, this is not new, but there was quite a long list this time, Jim.
Yeah, I don't know if these celebrities are just venting, and they will be so upset if their candidate doesn't win that they'll have to move, or if they're, what's the word I'm looking for, if they are doing it to try to influence other people to vote for their candidate, but they're really not going to leave at the end. So I went back and there was a lot of hysteria in 2016 and of course in 2020, but I want to go back 8 years because the same candidate won in 16 that won in 24.
Right.
And so I looked at Bryan Cranston, the Breaking Bad guy. And 16, he said he was walking out the door and he's not coming back.
I miss him.
He's still here.
He's still here?
Believe it or not. I think he might have decided to leave again this time. So I don't know. He did say he might retire in France in 26, but this was back in 16.
Okay.
So maybe he technically will leave in 2 more years and retire in France, but he's still here. And I think he's still doing some shows that I watched recently too. And I love him as an actor.
Oh, I do too.
I think he's phenomenal. Lena Dunham, back in 2016, she was walking out the door. She didn't, but in 21, I think she, has a boyfriend or maybe she's married and he's from London. So she did move to London in 21. So I'll give her like a half a pass at this point in time. Some of these people I never heard of. There's a guy named Neo. He said he was blowing out the door too, but he went from Georgia to Los Angeles. So he's still in the country as well. Barbara Streisand.
LA is kind of a different country, though. Just if you want to give a little extra credit point there.
Barbara Streisand, she's still here.
Yeah, she is, isn't she?
She threatened to walk in 16, and I think she threatened again in 24. So again, we'll see what happens. She's a little long in the tooth, though, so I'm not sure. She might not want to leave. Raven,
got me on that one.
So she's still here.
Okay.
Some guy named Josh Gad. I have no idea who he is, but. And, if you guys are watching out there and you think I'm a nut, I get it. But Josh Gad's still here. Amy Schumer's still here. Old Snoop. Snoop's gotten wildly popular in the last year. We saw him at the Olympics, cheering people on. And he's in every commercial known to mankind now. He's on the Martha Stewart documentary on Netflix.
I want to say there was something between Martha and Snoop Dogg.
Could have been. I don't know.
I'm just saying. That's what I heard.
He's still here.
He's still here.
Still here. Yeah. 16. And I don't think he threatened to leave this time, but he was pumped in 16 because California at the time legalized marijuana, and he's a big advocate of marijuana. So maybe that's what kept him, in the U.S. going forward. I would think his bank account probably did too, since he seems to be doing everything these days. And by the way, I like the guy. I think he's kind of funny.
Oh, I do too.
Not a big fan of his music, but I kind of like the guy. Samuel Jackson.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah.
He threatened to leave.
Oh, yeah. He was ready to rock.
Wow.
Yeah. By the way, a lot of these people are going to go to Canada. And I saw a meme today with 2 Canadian Mounties at the border, and one says to the other, "You see any celebrities?" And the other guy goes, "Not yet." But anyhow, he's still sticking around. Rob Reiner, who I think had a meltdown a month or so ago, he said he was leaving. So we'll see what happens.
Well, now that guy was cast so well.
All in the Family?
Oh, yeah. I mean, he truly is as he was. So.
Yeah. And he's a great director, too.
Oh, he is. Great movies.
And Springsteen, New Jersey born.
Yeah, that was tough.
Yeah, he was ready to go. No, not in 16. He's ready to go now.
Now, I know.
So the guy tours still at 75 or 76. He's unbelievably, vibrant as that age person. He's healthy. He's does great shows still, plays for 3.5 hours.
Yeah, amazing.
Most of them, those venues are in the U.S., so, even if he does move someplace else, he's still going to be in the country a lot, but we'll see what happens. I think he loves New Jersey and all that stuff, so, you never know. Bradley Whitford, who the guy that played in West Wing years and years ago.
Oh, yes.
I think he actually thinks that was a politician, in the West Wing. He was hysterically threatening to leave also, and is distraught now, by the way, if you go on X and look him up. But I think what's probably going to happen at the end of the day is the same amount of people that left in 2016 are going to leave again in 24.
Well, the threat seems hollow, Jim. Has anybody ever left? I mean, and I'm serious because I know the LA Times just did a piece on people out in California who were threatening to leave the United States if Donald Trump is elected. So, but I'm just wondering, it's not the first time that's happened, if any of these people ever leave. And why do you make a threat you're not going to follow through on? That seems to be from a tactical perspective, not good.
I think, unfortunately, they're human beings just like everybody else.
Emotional.
And they probably take themselves way too seriously, we probably all do.
Yeah.
And they're not thinking before they say. And they also think that because they've been celebrities and they're famous and they got a platform and lots of money, they probably think people actually, they can influence people. And I think a lot of people, majority, just know that they're just really good at a trade, which is acting. And just like somebody's really good at banking, just like somebody's really good at producing podcasts, just like somebody's really good at broadcasting or making tea, it doesn't mean that's your identity. It just simply means you're good at one thing, you know, and you could be terrible at everything else. So unfortunately, as I say, sometimes you fly a little too close to the sun, wax melts off your wings and you drop right down to the ground and you're basically vicarious at that point in time. So I find them humorous. So in this way, it's kind of a positive hot take because I think at the end of the day, we're living in a great country.
Well,
right?
I do too.
And if these people have all these things at their fingertips, where are they going to go? I mean,
that's true. There's not a country like this one.
Right. And on top of that, if you're really that good of an actor, just go out and do a great job acting because no matter what, half those people that are going to watch you don't believe in your politics. Right?
That is true. And I wanted to ask you because you're a very successful businessman. Why anybody, whether it be actors, singers, broadcast facilities, whatever, would choose one side over another. Bruce Springsteen, for instance, he came out for Kamala Harris, which is fine. But then you have the other half of your audience who may be impacted by that. You say certain things. Why would you want to lose half your fan base, for instance?
Maybe they don't at the end of the day.
Maybe they don't? Okay.
But I don't know. I mean, I think I'm okay with, you having your opinion on whoever you want to vote for.
Of course.
Whatever. But, you can't dismiss the other half that disagree with your politics. They are just as important to this country as the people that agree with you. And obviously we saw that, in the past, couple of days. And I think at the end of the day, if I'm Bruce, I'm like, hey, I like Kamala. Here's why. But I love everybody. And I just want this country to be as great as possible. And I think she could get us there. But if it doesn't happen that way, we're going to do great. It's okay because we're all Americans and we're all great. And we're going to go out and just live our lives and try to make our kids and make everybody around us better human beings.
I agree with you. We have more in common than we don't. I just wish more people would drink tea, though, because
me too.
It is absolutely delicious today. I mean, it's one of the better ones that you've brought in. And have I thought more clearly since I've been drinking the tea and doing the podcast?
Yeah, you seem to be pretty sharp right now.
I thought so. Yeah. I felt that too.
Yeah, absolutely. But 50cupstea.com. Since we talked a lot about plastics today, we do have our detox brand.
Beautiful.
Which I unfortunately didn't bring in today because I ran out. But we're making another batch at this point in time. But that'll help detox your body as well. So
wonderful. Jim, as always, a pleasure. Thank you for doing the research and giving us your hot takes.
Thanks for joining us on Hot Takes 50 Cups. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to visit our website at 50cupstea.com for more great content and delicious organic teas, and listen and watch us on all the leading platforms. Stay connected with us on Instagram at 50cupstea, YouTube, and TikTok. And don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share with your friends. Until next time, keep sipping and stay united.